The differences in life today are enormous. Housing is different, area is different, wealth is different, means are different. Family life is not as cohesive as it was. Knowledge of language, for example, every week we were in the Yiddish theatre at the Grand Palais, either the pavilion in Mile End or the Grand Palais with the Tselnikas and others, and that was a sight to be seen because the people used to come and very often used to bring a three-course meal and eat it. And if the person on the stage asked a question, it was often answered from the audience. It was uproariously funny. But the Yiddish theatre was a great outlet for us all. So you haven't got the Yiddish element, although you're beginning to get Yiddish courses and klezmas and so forth. There's a much more assimilated mentality, inevitably. My parents both came from East Europe, so I was only one stage away from East Europe, whereas my grandchildren are several stages away. And it would be very difficult to recollect or to bring back the feeling. You would not have the same feeling. It would be more like a literary or an examination study to consider what life was like in the 20s, 30s, and so forth. Obviously, the war and the destruction caused by the Second World War ended the East End as we knew it. There was a great spirit, what you might call a ruach, in the whole area, which was very profound. We were a community. We were part one of another. We supported each other. We helped each other. I remember when there were orphans very often who did not go to Norwood, were helped in local families. There was a sense of freedom as far as me as a youngster and others were concerned. Going on holiday was something fascinating. We never went on holiday, just parents and children. We went as a whole big family. And there were always 20 or 30 of us going together. And we nearly always went to Margate or Westcliff or somewhere like that. And that was a fascinating dinner. Friday night dinner was either we in our home or with my grandmother, who was such a marvelous cook. She was such a wonderful cook. I don't think she ever bought anything that was in a tin or a bottle. Everything was freshly made. I used to watch her making strudel, acres of strudel or lokshen. And I had a wonderful time with my grandmother, who was a fabulous cook. And my main memory of food was Saturday. After shul, we had a very big dinner. We all sat down, whether it was in my own home or with my grandmother and all the uncles and aunts. And certainly on Sunday, we always had a very big dinner. But on Saturday, we had this great big dinner. And the result was that half the family fell asleep, including one of my uncles who fell asleep leaning on a piano. And half the family walked up and down Mile End and Whitechapel trying to overcome the excessive food that they had had. So you had patterns emerging. There was never a shortage of food, which is interesting. We never had a shortage of food. I think we gave precedence to food, and we didn't have the problem that non-Jewish people had locally of lingering in public houses, and the drunkenness, what had induced General Booth to start his Salvation Army there in Whitechapel and Mile End. My mother, who had come, my father came to this country in 1897. My mother came in 1902, and she was so appalled by people lying drunk in the street that despite the persecution and poverty, she even considered going back to Poland at that time. So the atmosphere was so different. We were a community within a larger community, and we kept together. There was a strong bond between the Jewish people at that time. There was a great creativity which emerged out of the East End, and it emerged out of the surrounding experiences that people had. They were rich experiences, and took to the stage, took to the novel very accurately and without difficulty. Hence, there's this whole galaxy of writers that live in us, and artists, of course, like I mentioned Rosenberg and Harry Blacker and a whole group of people like that. There was a creativity, both religious, business, secular, music, art, writing, a great creativity that emerged out of this Jewish community. Here was freedom. Here was freedom under the law, and therefore there was every opportunity to go ahead and create. And so, you know, I'm sort of just one representative. There are far better representatives. But there was a wonderful emergence of creativity of Jewish people, which had been under cover, or which had been suppressed, which had been subject to imprisonment or subject to persecution. And here we were, free people in a free country. That was marvelous.